So here I was back with the State Board of Education as an outlaw with Mr. Trump. The best thing that he can do is what he said he would do, and I hope he will do it, is just to abolish the Department of Education and give the reins back to the state of Kansas. The government is there to protect us as we go about it from external enemies, not from one another. I like to say, as fringe at the beginning, we're becoming the fabric. And they didn't watch us weaving.
Are you interested in innovative education and diversity in school models? Do you see a need for something different to bring about a reformation in our current education system? If so, then you've come to the right place. Join us as we discuss what's trending with unconventional learning models, including microschools, homeschool co-ops, creative learning centers, hybrid school models, and so much more. I am your host, Delina Wallace, president and founder of Wichita Innovative Schools and Educators, also known as WISE. This podcast, Wise and Otherwise, explores what our local hub of education entrepreneurs are doing in Wichita. We will also explore and offer brief introductions to the many local and national organizations that support innovation and education. Welcome to Wise and Otherwise. Okay, welcome back to another episode of Wise and Otherwise. Today I have with me Becky Elder. She is an amazing long-time homeschool mom from the very, very beginning, and also a microschool founder. She is a business owner. I mean, I don't even know all of the things about Becky Elder. Her family, there's a long heritage there with education and education freedom and school launching. Becky, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you. This is fun.
It is fun. I just think about, meeting you several years ago in our first conversation. We just met up here in Pleasant View with the Dutch kitchen, I think it was, and we had coffee together. We had a cinnamon roll, and
that's the way great things happen. Just when you sit down and get to know each other.
Exactly. We just knew right away there was a lot of alignment. I was so fascinated by. I think, what was funny is that at the time we met, I still didn't know that you had started Northfield School of Liberal Arts. I was reaching out to you because I thought, oh, she does like homeschool classes for kids at her Elderslie farm. I knew about your goats and your, berry picking and the field trips and stuff. And then we started talking and you said something about your school. And it was like mid-conversation. I was like, you started a school? And yeah. The rest is history. We've just connected.
Is history. Yes, that's good.
Yeah. And I love just dreaming. And you were one of those people that I could dream big with, and every idea I would share, you were like, yes, let's do it. Yes. So Becky is also like an elder on our team with the WISE organization. We have the Wichita Innovative Schools and Educators here in Wichita, and she is one of the founding members and has played an integral part in shaping this movement beyond what we started with the WISE network. That's only about 3 years old. Before that, I want to go into your history and your family, and you have laid down roots here in Kansas and you have paved the way. You're like one of those pioneer spirits, you and your father. And so tell me a little bit, first of all, about your own education background as a child.
Well, I think what we do for our children as children does set the pace for their life. What we do in the kitchen, at the dinner table, in the car, driving to a vacation spot. What we do together as a family is most important. And I like to take the story way back and say that my great-grandmother, Eldora Dugan Love, was around Douglas, Kansas, and she was a very literate woman. I have loved discovering the depth of her commitment and accomplishment. She was writing poetry for magazines in Kansas City and mailing them from Douglas, Kansas around 1900. She was awarded statewide and region-wide awards for her poetry and her insistence on both literacy and composition. And I really I run the family archives from the back of a friend's garage, and we have so many little moments that I have not yet discovered, and this was one of them just recently.
Oh, wow.
But Eldora Dugan Love was mother to Walter Lowry Love, and Walter was one of those people who went to school on the prairie, Douglas, Gordon, Walnut River Valley, just a farm boy. But he distinguished himself by having to come home when his father was hurt in an accident, and he had to wait 2 years before he went back into school. And he finished up in a one-room schoolhouse and went directly into a position in a small bank, which brought him to Wichita. And when he got to Wichita, he started Love Box Company in 1920. His son, my father, Robert Love, was he was in the infantry. I love these things. He was in the infantry in Patton's 103rd Army, marching from Paris to Berlin between 1942 and 1945. And he met my mother when he was wounded. He was wounded in Belgium. She was a Red Cross nurse in the Cotswolds in England. And if you know, the Cotswolds are right in the middle of England. So if there was anybody who was going to try to bomb the hospital units, they'd have a long way to get there and we'd have time to stop them. But anyhow, they met in that hospital and found out they were 50 miles apart. She was from Hutch and he was from Wichita. And they fell in love and got married and came home, and they started back to work with Walter Love, grandpa. And mom and dad's the first fight they had, and not a fight between husband and wife, but sort of as soldiers still on the march, was with right to work. In the late 40s, right to work became a movement that started here in Wichita. Very, very profound thought that men can work even when unions strike. And then after that, it was school. After that, it was economics. He was very active, and mother was, of course, incredibly supportive and fluent in all the things that he did. But the education part was the moment when the three children, my brothers and myself, were all at Fabrique School in East Wichita at that time. It's since, of course, been closed, but my oldest brother was in 4th grade, and mother said, "This kid can't read the front page of the newspaper. I'm never going back." And so he was the catalyst for that decision for Dad to start a school. And what was particularly wonderful was that the people that came with us at that beginning, and it was the beginning of what is now Wichita Collegiate School, the people that came with us were innovative, entrepreneurial, dedicated to loyal activity, values. We were Wichita, and we had been together, and we went together. And I love that moment in the history of my educational background. So collegiate started very humbly with 12 students and 4 families, and wow. We were truants. The State Board of Education had a letter on file that said, "We can close your school at any moment." They never did. And in years to come, they began to use us as a model for the standard of private schooling in the state. So after 2 years of being truant, the school grew very, very quickly and well. It was an accomplished fact that a non-parochial private school in Kansas could flourish. and we did. And then it was, for me, it was marriage and children, and it was time for me to go follow my dad's footsteps. He was on the board of directors still at collegiate school around 1981. And he said, I've got your place in the kindergarten class. Come on, bring the kids. And I said, no, I've met this thing called homeschooling, and it's going to allow me to stay with them all the time, not part of the time. And so we launched into homeschooling. My sister-in-law was very instrumental. She was from California, and she was already a do-it-yourself, go over the top kind of person, home birth, home school, just how to avoid the establishment, really. But
was this
said,
Bob's wife or Randy's wife?
Bob's wife, yeah, my brother Bob's wife, and
okay,
and we started into it, and we found out that we were truants again. There were no real established laws for or against it, but in order to be recognized, you had to notify the State Board of Education. So here I was back with the State Board of Education as an outlaw. And then subsequent to the homeschooling experience, there was a moment when the boys, there were 3 boys at the top, and I realized that they needed larger context and more relationship than was available. We were in a rural setting and pretty isolated at times. Had good families around us, but in terms of homeschooling, it hadn't caught on. So we started in 1993. We started Northfield School of the Liberal Arts in a warehouse that Lovebox owned. It was an old, dusty place, and we carved out some classrooms. And then we ran into zoning. It was not zoned educational because there were transport trucks. There were big, semi trucks coming and going all day long in the parking lot where we were holding school. So the mothers were in line to drop their kids off with the semis that were dropping off their paper for us to make paper boxes. And my brother, Bob, again, who was a lawyer from the University of Chicago, and a very tenacious person by temperament, went to the zoning committee and said, zone us educationally. And it was a funny story for several months, and he got himself cartooned in the newspaper as a bus driver on a wild bus, and we just went right ahead. And every time we met an obstacle, we explained it well, and that was our hallmark. Our educational background had been to explain things well. We sat around as children and listened to people who explained things well. And they were not vacuous. They were historical. They were theological. They were philosophical. They were people who had to explain things well. And so that was our training at the dining room table, at our parents, as we walked through things with our parents. And then at the COVID moment, we started Northfield, and then COVID split us apart. We had varying degrees of concern over the COVID event. And so we had to move up to, we had to move the school up next to Friends University. And we just decided to divide into 3 cohorts. And we designed a way that Northfield could remain a scholarship organization for 3 LLCs. And I believe this is very important. I believe that right now what we're watching is the microschool movement is burgeoning, is the need for certain kinds of accommodations and shelters and support. And I think we have stumbled into a very good model with a 501c3 at the top, and then these operative owned by the teacher,
Mhm.
LLCs underneath. And then where I met you with the Wichita Innovative Schools and Educators was one more fabulous, timely iteration of just exactly what my great-grandmother was doing and what my father did along the way, taking responsibility for our own children in terms of their education. So I tell people now, if I start with my great grandmother way back on the prairie and I come
Mhm.
forward to 2025, I feel like Anna and Simeon in the temple waiting to see Jesus. I've been waiting for all of you. I'm ready, ready to turn
Yeah,
the reins over to you.
and
Die a
planted a
happy
lot of
woman, having
seeds
seen the great
along the way.
success. I'm not a lot of seeds. Yes. So that's the history.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing history. I'm so intrigued by this. Just your forward thinking, your father, your entire family, just being so forward thinking and creative and going against the stream, going against the flow. I was just so you're like one of these people that like every time I meet you and connect and we have another conversation, I learn another bit of fascinating information. And it was the same way when you gave me the book that your dad wrote, and I have it on my shelf over here. But you were like, would you like to read the book that my dad wrote about starting schools? And I was like, absolutely. It's like totally into that. That was my thing. And I start reading it, and like a few pages into it, I'm like, collegiate? Your dad started collegiate? I'm like, this is Wichita Collegiate we're talking about here. You didn't mention that. You just said a school that my dad built or started. And I'm thinking, okay, little country schoolhouse. But yeah, there's so much rich history here and investment that you personally, and you've seen your father invest in personally. What's it like to go against the flow in such a way when you feel convinced that you're doing what's best for your own kids and for your family? And then when you see and you want to pave the way and pioneer something that you think would be good for people all across Kansas.
Well, I think you must recall any pioneer experience, and you can start with missionaries coming from Rome to the island of Britain in 300, AD, and the missionaries came after Rome collapsed. And what do you do when a system collapses? You start the next day to put back in place what needs to happen. And you are always going against the flow because the flow is always the easiest. It's the easiest route to take. Stay in the system, stay in the empire, stay in the shelter, or step out and find out what it is you have and the people around you have to go forward without fear. Now you have great reservations about how many resources you'll have and maybe even if you'll be there tomorrow, but it is this habit, and it's a human habit to go on, and it's an American habit to go on, and very beautifully it's a Kansas habit to go on. We just go on. And I think that everything depends on your capacity and your willingness to just grapple with what you have, where you are, and challenge if you need to, or be quiet or dormant if you need to. Go to work quietly and happily with the people that are around you. So it's daily. It's incredibly daily, and it's fortified by networks of people that are wonderful. Some of them may be skeptical, but if you've earned their trust in a relationship, they're not condemning. And this is a very
Mhm.
important part of any movement, is you don't want to set up the adversarial confrontation unless you absolutely have to. I mean, if they don't recognize your goodness and they don't want you to survive, well, then you'll have to fight back. But generally, it's all about going forward quietly and deliberately.
Mm, I like that. Yeah. Something you mentioned earlier really struck me, but about you just learning because people explained things well to you and just taking the time in conversation. That's one of the things I really like to do on these podcasts from time to time is bring up some of these situations. Like we're doing an overview, a history of Kansas and the education space, and from your perspective, what that has looked like. Now, I'd love if you can help explain things well about the shifting sands in education here currently and what you foresee is coming. What does the future look like for education?
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Wise and Otherwise. We'd like to ask you to take a minute and please rate and review our podcast so that others can learn more about us, and just to continue to show your support for this work that we're doing. It would mean so much. So please, if you're on Spotify or Apple or YouTube, take a minute and give us a good review.
It's very bright. Everything is very bright because the pioneers came and they established Daniel Boone walked out into the wilderness and Boonesboro was not far behind him. And we have that network right now. We've established all the points along the Pony Express, all the points along the stagecoach line. There's plenty of help. There is wonderful help. WISE represents that. And there's an increasing number of national organizations, and I'll put in a pitch for Kansas Policy Institute right here, who have been on the crusade since Milton and Rose Friedman in the 60s, free to choose for your children's education. And Kansas Policy Institute, this many years later, is a direct emanation of that. So we have every support that we need. The thing that we have to figure out, the thing we must relentlessly pursue is cost. And this is the way that we show ourselves faithful, not to a socioeconomic group, but to the well-being of the people that are affiliated with us, both locally and statewide and nationally. And we must not seek extraneous costs. We will incur enough, but what we must be sure we're doing is collaborating and properly sharing, and we know how to do that. As Kansans, again, born in that pioneer spirit, I need a shelter. You have one. Come in. I need a cup of coffee. You have one. Come in. We will welcome one another. And the associations like WISE are so valuable. There's so much the startup moment for so many people, and letting them come into your shelter, letting them learn quietly as they go along their path is huge. In addition to that, we have again, thanks to Kansas Policy Institute and its affiliates, we have a very vibrant scholarship credit legislation that has grown. I don't remember exactly where it started, but the idea is that an individual or a corporation can give to certain established scholarship granting organizations. They are a defined legal entity, and that individual or corporation will receive a tax write-off. I think it started at 30%. It went to 40, 50, 60. I'm not sure if it's at 70 or 80 right now, but we did not look for vouchers. We looked for people to help people through a legitimate and incentivized program, and we call that scholarship granting organizations. And you've got to remember that they're not at all about excuse me, I'm sorry here. They're not at all about vouchers. They're all about sharing. And the money is more directly given to the student for a menu of options that they can purchase, like instruction. It could be tuition, but it could also be travel. It could be music. And this is a construct, again, by this network of state organizations that is helping to will help us in Kansas. We have one obstacle, and that's the governor, bless her soul. She stood against both the House and the Senate in 2023 and 24 to block the education savings account. She's balanced 1, 2, 3. We'll have this, and this will be a game changer. It will make people think very seriously about doing what their heart wants them to do, but their pocketbook won't allow. This is when we all need to be ready to say, let's collaborate so that the cost doesn't go up. Let's make this reasonable so that those who will provide scholarships are not inundated with candidates, and those who can't afford the tuition have they have a fighting chance to come out of the schools. Now, beyond that, and I wanted to make sure I mentioned this today, I believe that a lot of people are incredibly hopeful that the present administration with Mr. Trump will be enabling, supporting school choice. The best thing that he can do is what he said he would do, and I hope he will do it, is just to abolish the Department of Education and give the reins back to the state of Kansas. It's this idea of small, of local, of immediate person. And if he can do that for us, then we will see the paradigm shifted as readily, as obviously as it was in 1959 when mom and dad started the first non-parochial private school. We're on the verge of good change. I feel very, very, very excited.
And it sounds like you have hope. You're very hopeful about the possibilities with school choice. So if we were to have something pass where the dollars would follow the child and they would be able to go to the school of their choice, you feel like that's a good thing. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you see any, like, what's the downfall or the downside of this? Because I know we're both hearing a lot of criticism about school choice, and especially, I mean, it's interesting coming from you and, hearing the long, hard fight that you have fought for your freedom and for homeschooling freedom and for independent schools and for establishing these new anti-establishment kind of types of independent schools and settings. So are you fearful at all or nervous at all about any infringement that might come, or what strings are attached with funding?
No, because I have a better argument. And this is all about, there's a quotation from Wendell Berry, who's the prophet of the agrarian movement in the 21st century. And he says, the quality and the efficacy of your work depends on the depth of knowledge you have about the story you're in. We have a story that simply says people can do for themselves. The government is there to protect us as we go about it from external enemies, not from one another. We have a better argument. we have the assumptional argument that parents better be in charge and are in charge of their children. And I don't restrict it to private schools. I believe that, I like to say that Northfield School, which we started in that warehouse way back 1993. Somebody asked me, "Are you a private school?" I said, "No, we're not designating ourselves by public or private. We're a school. We educate." And I think once you just take away the adjectives, you take away the irritation, and you say, what is a good education and how is it accomplished? You open up a panorama of opportunities for people to pursue that are just their size. And so, yes, yeah, I know the government has a big club. I know they can stop a lot of things, but we really aren't, we're not in an armed conflict. So I don't need to worry about that. But we are in one of our wits. This is how well can we articulate who we are and legitimize what we are doing, and we can do that very well. And the good news is there's more coming all the time. The numbers are now there. I wanted to tell a funny story about a bill called HR 8, I believe, late 80s, early 90s. Homeschooling had become a rather public construct, and people were noticing it. And the Department of Education clamped down trying to certify mothers to teach, and benchmark testing at 3rd, 6th, and 8th grade in order to maintain a homeschool. Well, it was just a small announcement, and the people in Washington, the representatives, got so many calls in such a short amount of time that it was defeated before it ever got to the floor. It was taken off the agenda because they did not realize how strong the crabgrass was. They did not understand that we move under the radar, and we build a net. I like to say as fringe at the beginning, we're becoming the fabric, and they didn't watch us weaving. We were just weaving out of sight. And when it was time to defend ourselves, all we had to do was make a good phone call. So no, I'm not afraid.
Okay, so what do you say to homeschoolers? Because we are a lot of, very traditional, they're wanting to preserve their homeschool freedom. They've been doing this for years and years and decades. It might be a generational thing. And they are very threatened by the idea of school choice and what that might mean and how that might open a door for the government to somehow get their foot into their homeschool. What do you say? Explain this well to us.
Well, the best way to explain it is to look around us and say, where are the other subsidies that come to us as human beings in our nation? Every time you're on the road, you pay taxes, but you are subsidized. The taxes are not the way they pay for the running of government. That's just a contribution that we make. I think the important thing is to realize we're all subsidized all the time. We're all in a kind of support group with one another. Some of it is public and some of it is private. But I really believe that a good idea, you have to participate. You can't sit at home and wait for them to come to your door. You've got to participate. This whole thing is totally predicated on what I call the interposition. Jesus hung on a cross between heaven and earth to save our souls. We have to do that same interposition, which is full participation in the governmental, the governmental work, in the fundraising work, in the curricular work. We just have to put ourselves there. Mm-hmm. It's not right to say that we aren't being taken care of or subsidized by other people. We are. And we just have to limit our usage of that. It's good to share. We have to limit our usage. We can't be hogs at the trough. We just have to use what we need and leave the rest for everybody else.
Yeah.
So people are not really, they aren't without subsidies already in so many places. And this is just one that's high profile in the conversation right now.
Yeah. And I like how you just reminded us, that we need to be active in what's happening in politics. We need to fulfill our civic duty, and we need to understand what's happening and be involved. And especially if we are thinking that we might want to utilize school choice funding, even more so, then it makes more sense for us to constantly be there in the conversation, in the room, speaking to our legislators at the hearings, learning, reading the bills and things like that, so that we have a voice, so that we have a seat at the table. I mean, we're all welcome to this, and I think it's really important. We can't just, if we're in favor of school choice and say, yes, we want it, and then sit back and not tend to that and be watchful. That's the thing. We have to play our part and do our part in that as well. So, and I know you do, and I know you stay involved.
Well, I have 18 grandchildren now, which is the good fruit of a wonderful, wonderful life. And I am depending on like I said, you showed up. I'm so glad. And sharing the stage is an easy moment because I have something to do. And I think that kind of mentality is very helpful as we go through this. The long view, very long view of history. I recommend a deep knowledge of history. And then you realize we're not in a fearful place. You realize people got to go through this all the time. My parents were soldiers. They never quit being soldiers. I don't like to think of myself as militant, but I think I am determined to see a job done that needs to be done. And so I participate as long and as fully as I can, and certainly try to get more people on board. And that's why I'm so grateful for Kansas Policy Institute, for WISE, for the other people that have come forward associationally to help us.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Well, do you have any other word of encouragement for us here in Kansas in this education space as we're wanting, what's best for all of our own kids, moms out there listening? One of the things, I know you and I've talked about this, is engaging the church in this. We have a role as the body of Christ to also be active and to be engaged and not step out of the arena like we've been doing for decades, but to enter the arena of K-12 education, because there's a mission field, there's an opportunity right there. What are some ways that you could see the church getting involved in this?
Well, it is astounding right now how loud the call is for the church, and what perfect mechanism it is. And it's decentralized. It is fortified by members that are voted to one another in the most assumptional, strong way through Christ. And we have everything to work forward beyond that attachment. All things are possible, but I'm pretty sure that they need to be decentralized. And this is essential. If the churches will take on the responsibility to provide their parishioners, their congregation with a church, not everybody has to come, But to do that, and we learn this efficiency, and we have these good things like education savings account, we should be successful. We already are.
Mhm.
And the church will only add one more layer of I don't want to call it convenience, but of efficiency that will help us keep that cost low, keep those kids together, and keep the movement alive and well. So yes, indeed, the church is an appointment in time for the education movement. And I believe they will assume their position. I'm seeing it. I'm seeing it happen. People,
Yeah.
it's just time. It's the right time. Things are converging.
Yep. Yes. It's exciting. It's so
It's
exciting.
exciting. Yes, it is.
Well, I love talking with you. I love hearing more of your perspective and your story. You have such a great long view,
Yes.
it's great. It's very helpful, much needed. So thank you for sharing your story with us. Is there anything else you'd like to say here before we end?
No, just gratitude. Just so grateful to God, my inheritance, my people, my and all of you who are participating. Just continue to do a good job. Continue to think well. Continue to speak well, and we're the winners. We're the footing on which the next group, our children, grandchildren, will stand. So let's be firm.
That's good. That's good. All right. Thank you so much, Becky.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thanks for joining us today. We'll talk soon.
Okay.